I'd like to say I'm a friend of the police. Now, I've been arrested many times, and I was telling my wife the other day, because Salisbury was in the news, Salisbury for something. Somebody crashed into a building. I said, oh, I was arrested in Salisbury. It was kind of funny. It was when I was engaged to be married. So what year was this, 79? Possibly? So, anyway, Salisbury, you know, I did a Three Stooges routine, step by step, slowly I turned. It was kind of a funny story, but I was putting dimes in parking meters because I wasn't drinking, I wasn't a drinker. So the fiance and her bunch were over at the bar room drinking. I thought, I just want to walk around. And I could see the officers ticketing, and it was a 5-minute limit on the parking and I think a $5 fine. I thought to myself, I think I was, I don't know, 21 maybe years old. I said, hey, let me help. Let me put dimes in the parking meter. So I thought that was legal. And the cops didn't want to hear legal, illegal. They just wanted me to stop, and I wanted to discuss whether it was legal or not. So they brought me in, and drunk and disorderly, and I was not a drinker. I yelled at them all night. I was a little bit of a rabid libertarian right-winger at that point in my life. And not that I was part of the Libertarian Party. I never did join, but I think from my fisheries roots, I got that contempt for government workers, you know. Because as I mentioned in one of the earlier shows, my mother boycotted eating codfish and buying codfish. And that really ticked me off. All right. And a healthy disposition for government workers in the New England, let's say, sentiment, the old-fashioned New Englanders, a healthy disposition about that. Because I used to hang around with the fishermen quite a bit. So, anyway, I'd like to say I'm a friend of the police. Yes, I am. I had two uncles, my Uncle John and my Uncle Joe, both police officers on my mother's side. And my grandfather, my mother's father. So state police, and I use the word quote, would not obey the law and enforce wetlands regulations. My history with the police, with the pond issue, is that the police would not enforce the law. So they were scofflaws that would not enforce their own laws because they were told by politicians not to. Don't enforce the law. So that, you know, that's no good. But there's no need to riot. I don't think the police are at fault quite often because if you have a police force and you're required to go arrest somebody ad infinitum, this big guy that was selling the cigarettes, what did he weigh, 275 pounds? He was a big guy. And he had some medical things going on, but he was resisting arrest, I guess, with the cops, and he was giving them a hard time, which I can't sympathize or relate to. I never gave cops a hard time. In fact, in Salisbury, two cops tried to rough me up, and I was not going to go there. I was just kind of limp. Oh, no. No, you want to put me in jail? Fine, but we're not going to have a wrestling match. If you want to put me in jail, I mean, you know, that's your problem. I was putting dimes in a parking meter. All right? No, it's not all right. I thought it was a good idea. Kind of a funny story. And I stayed up all night yelling at them, and at the end of it, in the morning, their chief came by and said, you can sue us if you want to. I think I got my money's worth. Maybe I needed to vent that out, I don't know. So we have the laws. We have due process. Now, if the police are answering to politicians, as they did with the pawn story, you know, that's not going to work, right? I hope that's not going to work for us. Because, you know, law enforcement is very simple. Isn't it? This is the law. Simple if the cops do the job. We can all be friends, right? But just do your job. If I get hired to do a job, I'd like to think I can do the job. And what's the job of the law enforcement? Isn't it to enforce the law? Huh? Don't you think? You're not going to make friends if you don't do your job. But I'm still friendly with the police. I like the police. I don't think it's a good idea to have drug houses, so I have commented on that. But I guess that's just our society, right? Can't blame the police, right? Of course, they're not doing their job, but it's somebody else's fault. It's our fault. What am I looking for here? Oh, here it is. I mentioned a movie called 1717. Now, that was this Judge Poland took the case of Arthur Stojak and John Cabral, who in 1954 were brought before the law and the judge and the magistrate, etc. And they were charged by, I guess his name was Hunchard, I think. And he was a state game warden at the time in 1954. And so the boys were fishing without a license. Well, that's good. It's Nantucket. All right. So they all knew, you know, the stage was being set here for a test case. So in 1954, Judge Poland, I guess he might have been a retired judge at that point, took the case for these boys. And he was a Nantucket judge. He was legendary for sailing in rough weather from Boston to Nantucket, so I was told by someone who knew him. So Judge Levine, Carolyn Levine, incidentally, I had a long discussion with some lawyer for Massachusetts, and you know, I was talking about Judge Levine. He thought Judge Levine was a guy, and so I let him go, and then I kind of said, Judge Levine, you know Judge Levine's first name? And he was referring to Judge Levine as a guy, and I said, it was Carolyn Levine. So he didn't know anything about this, but they were pushing for taking away something from Nantucket that the Nantucketers didn't appreciate. Having the pawns killed, I guess having the boys arrested and having this go before the courts, that was kind of mild compared to me coming up here in the next case. 2 scoops of sand, you know, for a test case, and then just the breakdown of due process through politics. Sometimes politics is good, sometimes not. I don't know if I should talk about my brother Paul. He died. I don't know. I can tell you they've gotten into my family on this issue, heavy duty. You'd go cold. I mean, you'd turn cold if you knew the truth about this story. Not that I deserve to be treated with the red carpet, of course, politically or in any way, but certainly if you're advocating for the Nantucketers and the Nantucket native rights, that always was an honorable pursuit between the state and Nantucket and New York, if you want to get technical. Well, not so much New York. In 1693, Nantucket came in to Massachusetts from New York. This is old history. Now, previous to that, I think I've been through this, the law was, through the colonial ordinance of 1647, that the great ponds in Massachusetts were public. You could have rights to go around and be on the pond and fish and fowling, they called it. Okay. So the ruling was in 1717, and that's why I call the movie 1717, because that was the first fight, and I think I was the 6th or 7th fight. Judge Poland and the Stojak and Cabral case, that was either the 5th or 6th. I'm not sure what you would call a fight, but the histories of this fight, which is a fishery management fight, goes way back. So the colonial ordinance of 1647, you know, it's pretty much was law in Massachusetts that the Great Ponds were public. Okay. And then from New York, here comes Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, I think Fisher's Island, the Elizabeth Chain, Block Island. They all get redistributed. So Nantucket held out. Nantucket held out and kept its tradition, and Nantucket had to fight for its tradition. And I quote one of the older town fathers, a deal is a deal is a deal. You know. Okay, so the precedent certainly was upheld in 1954. I was not allowed by the police to be in the courtroom. And I think one of the last times I was in the courtroom, I was treated as a retarded citizen or someone severely mentally ill. I had made a motion for the DNA test to be fair, and the judge squashed the motion and ignored the motion and just said, you know, no, I'm not acting on that. You don't have a motion. Not acting. And she didn't say she wasn't acting on it. Judge, the corrupt judge there, the dumb judge. She said, you know, you have a guardian ad litem now, so you have nothing to say. You're nothing, basically. You don't have standing in the court. I'm giving you a guardian ad litem. So that's their answer to the DNA request for legitimate DNA test, which is critical to me backing the state down on this issue. Now, if the state wants to do a DNA test and then answer for what they did and all the shenanigans, I hope they don't want to do that. I'm trying to back them down on this issue of the native rights, because there should have been a legitimate test case, and it was subverted. So I just think with an issue like this, it's such an old piece of history. You know, it's my brother's obituary. He was involved on the wrong end of this issue, my brother Paul. And I believe he paid for it. You know, I believe so. So what would you say to a little uncovering of horrible corruption? What would you say to that? You don't want to do that, do you? I don't want to do it either. So I would agree with you. I don't want to really do that, because the negative implications of uncovering some horrendous corruption with a DNA switch, let's just say every perpetrator would come out of the woodwork and he'd be waving, you know, this Scannell versus State of Massachusetts. Yeah, they did the same thing to me. You know, they switched the DNA. You know, it's terrible. Oh, I don't want that. So I don't. That's not a good thing to hurt the establishment, let's just say, if you don't need to. Because we all depend on the establishment, let's say. Yeah. Oh, What do we have here? More pawn stuff. Sackage pawn report. This is something from 1957. I was looking for something else actually here, obviously. He did write a book, Bulldoggy. It's at 51 pages or 50 pages. That was on fisheries management. I'm looking for something else. No, I don't see it. All right, I'll read this to you. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Speaking of the DNA switch, if it happened, or I'm a psych case. Ha! It's cute. It's rich, as they would say. This is on petitions, the petition site. Don't let the activist get slammed into the psych system. That's the title. Author Stephen J. Scannell, political activist, ostracized from Nantucket. Target people who believe in fair courtroom dealings for the political activist. 80 signatures so far. So it says here, the petition says, I request a simple 4-person DNA test which cannot be corrupted by a switch, as can 3-person mother, father, child. So there were 2 DNA switches. One of them was in the jail, and that was when I was charged with the restraining order violation. That's a criminal, violent criminal job there. And the white shirt guard came down and told the regular booking guard, no, you can't do that, just leave it alone, we're handling that, that's being handled, so don't take his DNA. So, and I can remember that guy he must have gotten cursed out something fierce, this booking guy, because any violent criminal that doesn't have a DNA in the register, they get tested. But in this case, at the jail, being booked in, it was a big deal. The white shirt guy came down and said, no, you don't test his DNA, that's being handled. So that was the first switch, which dictated the second switch, which was the paternity DNA switch. So if you've got mother, father, son, you can test the mother, father, and then see if the son is the son of the mother and the father. If you switch out the father, then you still have mother, father, son. So I fought tooth and nail to get mother, father, son, daughter, because I had claimed a conflict of interest existed in the state of Massachusetts, and I knew what they were up to. And that's why they wanted to put me away in Taunton, because they owed somebody on a paternity issue. All right, that's my claim. So we'll see, right? Do we want to do this? I don't want to do this. I requested an ironclad 4-person DNA test and then 5-person once that's done. If it comes up that, let's say I'm not the father of the second child. Disallowed it, instead giving me a 4-month sentence and a guardian ad litem. I ended up doing 30 days on that 4-month sentence, because I guess they said, this is not right. Somewhere along the line, once in a while, people have been saying, well, this isn't right, this isn't right. So it's okay if the state gets out of line on this issue. I think we'll all agree to that, because this has been a nutty issue since 1717. So it's just a piece of history. Don't get too worked up. So I was declared insane because a switch had taken place. I have been sentenced to a mental hospital and jailed repeatedly over this issue. The government's motive is a Sackage-upon contest, 1693 to the present. Well, that's not that accurate. Accurately, it would be called from 1717, because that was the first fight, let's say. And of course, Massachusetts lost. Okay. The state of Massachusetts was liable for millions in environmental damage. Again, you can read that if you Google up the ditch that divided Nantucket. That can tell you about that story. It's a cute story, really is. Except for the poor Nantucketers. Really. It's like they were getting raped. I didn't grow up with these ponds. I grew up in Harwich, but these poor Nantucketers, it was like seeing someone get raped, and I couldn't watch. So I pitched in. The state has lost the native rights battle 6 times since 1717, and I want to make it an even 7. I want the state to lose. I don't necessarily want to hurt the government. By the way, I had to leave my church because of politics, or I perceive because of politics. I consider what I do to be a sacred obligation. But I can go to any church, I suppose. I was repeatedly put in jail with no trial on environmental issues because the state of Massachusetts crimes, civil and environmental. I was an elected official on Nantucket and won on the issue on a town meeting vote. That's true. The people of the town meeting voted to go along with the judge, as I did, Judge Carolyn Levine and Judge Poland. I don't think you're on thin ice if you agree with the judge. But the state didn't agree with the judge, okay. So see Yankee Magazine, April 1992. I'm sick of the persecution. It is relentless. I ask you to side with me for a disinterested DNA test that is honest, so I can be free and continue my work for the environment, social justice for the disabled, and in the area of my energy systems. See environmentalfisherman.com. Please help the activists get a fair shake in the courtroom. I will not be vindictive. I just want that win. Boy, that's tough not to be vindictive when they bring in your family. Now, to lay some credence to this issue being a legitimate issue. Here, this is dated April 16th, 1957. Passed to be enacted, Newland H. Holmes, President. All right, that's Senate, in the Senate, May 28, 1957. I don't think this really passed. I think Nantucket started getting pushback in 1957. I guess maybe Massachusetts organized some support. Value of the Sheep Commons, the Sheep Commons Bill. All right, this is all real history. Oh, you gotta love it, really. This is true pre-American history. As I said, this is the oldest fishery management battle, either in the world or in this country, if you don't count the Native Americans. That's not right to say, but between white people, maybe. As you may know, it has recently been announced in the local papers that I had an option to buy the Sheep Commons last year. It is somewhat disconcerting to have one's personal contacts made public without one's consent. Nevertheless, blah, blah, blah. Judge Poland, who I admire, I'm reading some of this report here. Foster Fukalo, governor. All right. Judge Poland, who I admire as a lawyer, who incidentally thought this case was so interesting that he was handling it free of charge, assured me that within 6 weeks of ownership of the Sheep Commons, I could hold title not only to Sacajah Pond, but to all the other great ponds, undivided lands, and this has to do with the 1954 arrest by Officer Hunchard of Arthur Stojak and John Cabral for fishing in the ponds without state fishing licenses. It was concluded at this time that the bottoms of the great ponds belong to the proprietary and not to the state. I gave up on the idea because I was unable to obtain a right-of-way to the ocean over Mr. Richard Colgate's land without the right-of-way, could not control the level of salinity, etc. So that goes into the cranberry bogs. Rights-of-Way Committee report from Nantucket. This is real history. Whoa, I love it. I did open Hummock Pond twice, and I kind of saved that pond, I think, the water quality. If you don't open a pond, these salt ponds, they die. So I think Hummock Pond was saved by opening that pond. Thank you very much. A little pat on the back. I don't get many of them, but anyway. It's an amazing thing to open up a pond. So, House of Representatives, May 27, 1957, passed to be enacted I don't know if it made it through the Senate, and I think there was some pushback. But it was, you know, and this is by my friend Charles F. Sale, chairman, Clinton Andrews, my friend, secretary, Walter Barrett, all these people here. I didn't know Elwyn Francis. Okay, these were the real stewards of Mother Nature, you know. All right, and this has some town meeting issues about the Rights of Way Committee, etc. There was no real harm, you know. Actually, I think it's like this. If you're thinking rationally and you think of these native rights as a thing, as an asset, let's say for tourism, then you'd be on good solid ground, because what a rich history it is. And the salt ponds never had scallops, but Nantucket's a big scallop town. Anyway, to see this issue just as a tourist-related story, a piece of history that's still alive, that I'm fighting for, horrible fight here. I hope this is the last fight. I would stipulate, if Massachusetts will back down, this is the last fight. This will be in stone. No more fighting over this because of the rough nature of the fight to me and my family, mostly to my family. I always thought I was protecting my son Tom. That's harsh when you're intimidated and your family is in question. Very harsh, very harsh. But it's a nutty story. The fight goes back to 1717, and guess what? That'll be 300 years. So it'd be a good time for the state of Massachusetts to either back down or suffer the consequences of answering to, and our society's going to suffer more than the politicians, answering to a possible DNA switch. You know, either they did it or I'm nuts. Did I list my 7 diagnoses? It's God acts in mysterious ways, okay? So here I am redesigning the social services. That's a gift that I'm in there doing that. So I have to have a grain of salt here and there. I had designed the fisheries system before cops came to get me, to put me in jail and in Taunton and, you know, all this mess, all this payback, as I call it.